Welcome to week 3 of Broken and Beloved. This week we will take a look at a parable, a teaching story of Jesus. It is found in Luke chapter 14, verses 16 to 24. Jesus tells the story of a man who threw a great banquet, and he invited guests who were kind of distracted and didn't come. It's an interesting story that talks and enters us into the paradox of distracted and centered. Last week, you might remember that Jesus was on his way to a Pharisee's house on the Sabbath for a dinner. And just as he gets there, in front of them is a man with dropsy. And Jesus heals him. Inside, he talks to the Pharisees, and he teaches them about God's kingdom and humility. He invites them to think about those who can't pay them back when they invite folks over for dinner. Reciprocity was a social value in the ancient world. I invite you to my house, you in turn are obligated to invite me to your house. Jesus says that the kingdom of God operates on a different value system, and he challenges the host that when they invite folks for the next dinner, invite those who can't pay back. The poor. The poor are unable to return anything of material value to those who have invited them. Those who seek riches, those who operate in the world's economies, demand something in return for giving something. Jesus invites a different kind of thinking. And in this parable of the great dinner, Jesus talks about those who are wealthy being too busy to come to the dinner. They give excuses, 3 sets of excuses. All of them involve wealth. Those exclude themselves from the feast on account of their status and wealth and riches. It incites great anger in the host of the meal. Now, this is an interesting story. Matthew also tells the story, but in Matthew's Gospel, the story is told of a king who invites people to a great wedding feast. And when they refuse to come and make excuses, he sends his army out and has them destroy those wicked people. But for Luke, there is no violence. There is anger for sure, and it's directed at those with wealth and prominence, the leaders of the religious people. That's a good point to make here, because this is not God rejecting Israel or the Jews, but simply the Pharisaic leaders of the faith. It is the faith leaders who don't have time to dine at Jesus' table of love, humility, and compassion. They refuse the invitation to invite the outsider, the poor, the lame, the blind, the crippled. And as a result, they find themselves on the outskirts of God's kingdom. But the poor, the blind, the lame, they are Jews as well. So this is not about replacing Judaism. the twisted, wrong-headed notion of supersessionism. God remains faithful to Israel. And God invites not only Israel to the feast, but goes beyond those boundaries. And at the end, God's desire is to fill the house. Fill it with people, create a community, not of violence, but of love, a community in which all are included and strengthened by their participation. Those who are too busy, those who are centered in wealth and possession, they find themselves excluded by their own inaction, their own lack of response, their own distraction. That brings us to the end of looking at today's text. May God bless you on your Lenten journey as we continue as God's broken and beloved people.